A phone buzzes on a nightstand at 2 a.m., then another one, then 30 more across the same building. That sound, that specific vibration pattern, every service member knows what it means before they even look at the screen. Nobody had to be told twice. When Iranian ballistic missiles began slamming into Israeli territory, the shockwave wasn't just physical. It rippled through every operations center, every command post, every military installation connected to the United States Armed Forces. Within minutes, the alert cascaded outward like a stone dropped into still water. CENTCOM pushed the order. EUCOM acknowledged. Bases in the continental United States that had been quiet 5 minutes earlier were now alive with movement. The entire American military apparatus shifted from standby posture to something far more urgent. Not a drill, not an exercise, the real thing. But here's what most people never see. Before a single American fighter jet screams over hostile territory, before a single guided bomb finds its target, before any of that happens, there's an operation behind the operation. A massive, grinding, almost incomprehensibly detailed machine that has to spin up first. And it all starts with people getting out of bed in the dark. The notification system works like falling dominoes. The combatant command sends the alert to component commands. Component commands push it to individual units. Unit commanders notify their senior enlisted leaders. Senior enlisted leaders start waking people up. Within an hour of the first Iranian missiles crossing into Israeli airspace, phone trees were burning across a dozen installations in the United States. Marines at Camp Lejeune, airmen at Shaw Air Force Base, soldiers at Fort Liberty, maintenance crews at Langley, loadmasters at Dover. Everyone got the same basic message. Report immediately. Prepare to deploy. Timeline unknown. There is a moment, and every veteran knows it, when you read that message and the room gets very still. Your eyes adjust to the blue glow of the phone screen. You read it again. Then you look over at the other side of the bed, or at the ceiling of your barracks room, or at the family photos on the shelf, and you understand that whatever your life looked like yesterday, it is about to look very different. Some people called home, some didn't, some couldn't. Everyone got dressed, grabbed what they needed, and moved. At the flight line, the lights were already on. The C-17 Globemaster III doesn't look graceful. It looks like what it is, a machine designed to swallow enormous quantities of people, vehicles, and cargo, haul all of it across an ocean, and spit it out on the other side, ready to fight. On this night, maintenance crews were already running through pre-flight checks on every available airframe. Auxiliary power units hummed, navigation systems booted, hydraulic lines were inspected. These aircraft had to be ready to accept cargo within hours, not days. Marines arrived first at one installation. Buses pulled up to the barracks, engines idling, headlights cutting through the dark. The Marines filed on in silence. Not the dramatic, movie-style silence, the working silence. The kind where everyone is running their own mental checklist. Rifle, plates, nods, batteries, water. The bus ride to the airfield took 11 minutes. Some guys slept, some stared out the window. One kid in the back row was writing something on his phone with his thumbs, fast, like he was trying to finish a thought before he lost signal. At the airfield, the C-17 sat on the tarmac with its rear cargo ramp yawning open, the interior lit by strips of yellow-white overhead lighting. The Marines filed off the buses and walked directly up the ramp. No ceremony, no hesitation. They moved to their assigned positions in the cargo bay, sat down on the red nylon webbing seats that line the fuselage walls, and buckled in. Their rucksacks went between their feet. Their rifles went across their laps. While the Marines settled in, the loadmasters were already directing cargo handlers who were driving up in forklifts and flatbed utility carts. Ammunition crates came first, then cases of MREs, portable generators strapped to pallets, communications equipment in hardened transit cases, medical supply kits, water purification components, rolls of concertina wire. Everything was driven up the ramp, positioned precisely on the cargo bay floor according to the load plan, and strapped down with chains and ratchet straps. The load plan isn't a suggestion, it's a mathematical calculation. Weight distribution, center of gravity, tie-down strength ratings. If the load shifts during flight, people die. Every single item was secured, checked, and rechecked. This particular aircraft was scheduled to make an intermediate stop. Another base, another pickup. More personnel, more equipment. Then across the Atlantic and into the Middle East with a full load. At a second installation, several more C-17s were going through the same process. But here, the cargo was heavier, much heavier. Armoreds were being driven up the rear ramps one at a time. MRAPs, those massive mine-resistant trucks that weigh over 40,000 pounds fully loaded. Tactical all-terrain vehicles. Armored gun trucks with turret mounts. Each vehicle was driven slowly up the ramp by a qualified driver, guided by a loadmaster using hand signals. Once inside the cargo bay, the vehicle was positioned over the anchor points built into the aircraft's floor. Chains were threaded through the tow hooks, around the axles, through any hardpoint that could bear the load. Ratchet binders were cranked tight. Then the loadmaster got down on his hands and knees and physically checked every single chain, every single binder, every single anchor point. He tugged on them. He put his weight against them. If one didn't feel right, the whole vehicle got rechained from scratch. The vehicles took up the majority of the cargo bay floor space, so any personnel flying on these particular aircraft were seated in the narrow strip of space along the fuselage walls, pressed between the cold aluminum skin of the aircraft and the steel flank of an MRAP. Nobody complained. There was nothing to complain about. This was the job. Outside on the ramp, the aircraft waited in a line. As each one was loaded and sealed, it taxied forward to make room for the next. The choreography was precise. Forklifts, fuel trucks, cargo loaders, personnel buses, all moving simultaneously across the same apron without collision, without confusion. Every vehicle had a place to be. Every driver knew the pattern. At a separate airfield, the scene was different in texture, but identical in urgency. Here, there were no transport aircraft. This was a fighter base. Rows of F-15E Strike Eagles and F-16 Fighting Falcons sat on the flight line under harsh floodlights. These aircraft were not being loaded for transport. They were being prepared for war. Maintenance crews swarmed each jet in teams. Every fighter received a full end-to-end inspection, the kind that normally gets spread across a scheduled maintenance window, but was now being compressed into hours. Crew chiefs opened access panels along the fuselage and examined the wiring bundles inside, checking for chafing, corrosion, loose connectors. Avionics technicians climbed into the cockpits and ran diagnostic checks on the radar systems, the targeting pods, the electronic warfare suites, the heads-up displays. Each system was powered up, tested, and either cleared or flagged for repair. Engine specialists pulled the intake covers and inspected the fan blades with flashlights, looking for foreign object damage, cracks, anything that could cause a compressor stall at the worst possible moment. They checked oil levels, hydraulic fluid reservoirs, and bleed air systems. Fuel system technicians verified the integrity of the internal tanks and the plumbing that fed JP-8 kerosene to the engines. Every filter, every seal, every valve. Flight control surfaces were cycled. Ailerons, rudder, stabilators, flaps, speed brakes, all moved through their full range of motion, while a technician watched for binding, lag, or abnormal movement. Landing gear was inspected. Tires checked for wear. Brake assemblies examined. The tail hook on each aircraft, used for emergency arrestments, was tested. These jets were not going on a single mission. They were being prepared for sustained combat operations, multiple sorties per day, over a period that could last days or weeks. That meant everything had to be right. Not close to right. Right. A hydraulic leak might be acceptable for a training flight was unacceptable here. A radar glitch that might clear itself on a peacetime sortie got pulled from the line and fixed before the jet went anywhere. There was no margin for good enough. Back at the staging base, while aircraft were being loaded and fighters were being turned, soldiers were in the hangar going through their own preparation. This part doesn't make the highlight reels, but it matters. Each soldier had to pack for an indefinite deployment with no set return date. That changes the calculus on what goes into the bag. Duffel bags were spread open on the concrete floor, uniforms folded and rolled tight, boots broken in, socks more than you think you need because you always need more than you think, hygiene kits, prescription medications, spare eyeglasses, dog tags, power banks, charging cables, letters, photographs. One soldier taped a small drawing to the inside of his assault pack. His daughter had made it. He didn't say anything about it to anyone. He didn't need to. The guys on either side of him had their own versions of the same thing. A wedding ring on a chain, a note folded into a square, a phone background they kept glancing at. These things don't show up on the packing list, but they go in the bag every time. Nobody was told when they were coming back. The leadership didn't have that information because the situation didn't have that answer yet. The soldiers packed accordingly, which meant packing like they might not see for a long time. Some had done this before, some hadn't. Either way, the bags got packed, the rooms got cleaned, and the personal effects that weren't coming along got locked in storage or handed off to a battle buddy staying behind. At dusk, the order came down. Prepare for boarding. The soldiers formed up in columns outside the hangar. Their ranks were clean, their bags slung, their expressions set to that particular frequency of combat deployment demands. They marched in formation across the tarmac toward their assigned aircraft. The sun was low, throwing long shadows across the concrete. The heat from the day was still radiating up from the ground, mixing with the smell of jet fuel and exhaust. They walked up the ramps, found their seats, sat down, buckled in. The loadmasters moved through the cargo bay doing final head counts, checking manifest numbers against faces, confirming that every seat was occupied and every piece of cargo was secure. The ramps began to close, hydraulic actuators pulling tons of metal upward until the seal was tight, and the interior went from open air to pressurized tube. One by one, the aircraft taxied out of their parking spots and moved toward the runway. The engines spooled up, that deep, resonant whine that vibrates through the airframe and into your chest. Brakes released, throttles advanced. The C-17 accelerated down the runway and lifted off. Gear retracting, flaps adjusting, the nose pitching upward into the darkening sky. Then the next one. Then the next. From the ground, they were just lights. Red, white, blinking, rising in east, one after another, until the formation was gone and the airfield was quiet again. But only for a few hours. More aircraft were already inbound to pick up the next wave. When the C-17s touched down in the Middle East, the heat hit first. Not like summer back home. This was a different species of heat. Dry, heavy, and relentless. The kind that sits on your skin and stays. The rear ramps dropped and daylight poured in, white and blinding after hours in the dim cargo hold. The soldiers filed out and stepped onto foreign tarmac. Vehicles were unchained and driven off the aircraft immediately. Cargo pallets were pulled by forklifts before the last Marine had even cleared the ramp. The urgency hadn't faded during the flight. If anything, it had intensified. These same C-17s needed to be turned around and sent back to the United States for another load. And another after that. The pipeline was flowing now, and any delay at the delivery end backed up the entire system. For the soldiers stepping off those ramps, this base was now home. No end date, no rotation schedule posted on the wall, just a location, a mission, and the understanding that they would be here until they weren't. Base personnel directed them toward their assigned quarters. Temporary housing, cots, shared tents, or hardened shelters depending on the base. They dropped their bags, checked their gear, and waited for further instructions. The buildup was just beginning. More flights were already in the air. On the airfield at the forward operating base, the maintenance crews operated on a cycle that didn't recognize sunrise or sunset. The fighters were parked in rows on the apron, some out in the open under the punishing sun, others tucked into hardened aircraft shelters, concrete bunkers designed to protect them from incoming rockets or mortars. The work didn't stop regardless of location. Fuel trucks rolled up alongside each aircraft in sequence. A crew member connected the single-point refueling nozzle to the fueling port on the underside of the fuselage. JP-8 kerosene began flowing into the internal tanks. The fuel quantity was monitored on the truck's gauge panel, rising steadily until the tanks read full. The nozzle was disconnected. The port was sealed and wiped clean. The truck pulled away and moved to the next aircraft in line. Then the weapons teams arrived. They brought the ordnance on specialized loading carts, low-slung trailers designed to carry missiles and bombs at the precise height needed for mounting. Air-to-air missiles, AIM-9X Sidewinders, and AIM-120 AMRAAMs were lifted onto the wingtip rails and the fuselage stations. Each missile was guided into its rail, pushed forward until the lugs engaged, and locked into position. The umbilical connector was plugged in, linking the missile's guidance system to the aircraft's fire control computer. A quick electronic handshake confirmed the connection. Green light, move on. Guided bombs were next. GBU-31 JDAMs, 2,000-pound satellite-guided weapons, were hoisted onto the underwing pylons using hydraulic loading jigs. Each bomb was lifted into position, the mounting lugs aligned with the pylon hooks, and the release mechanism engaged. The wiring harness was connected, the data link tested. The arming pin was inserted into the fuse assembly, a thin metal pin with a red streamer flag hanging from it, visible from a distance. Those red flags meant the weapon was safed. They would stay in place until the aircraft was ready to taxi to the runway. Only then would the ground crew pull the pins and clear the aircraft for live weapons employment. After every weapon was mounted, the team conducted a final visual inspection. They checked the mounting lugs for proper engagement. They checked the release mechanism for correct positioning. They checked the alignment of each weapon on its pylon to make sure nothing was canted or shifted. They checked the wiring connections one more time. Then they signed off on the load sheet and moved to the next jet. The process repeated for every fighter on the line. One after another, each aircraft went through the identical sequence. Fuel, weapons, airframe inspection, avionics check, flight control verification, engine run-up. The same steps, performed with the same precision, by crews who had done this 1,000 times in training and understood that this time, every single one of those weapons was coming off the rail. By the time the pilots walked out of their mission briefing and crossed the tarmac toward their assigned jets, every aircraft on that ramp was fueled to capacity, armed to specification, inspected to standard, and cleared for combat operations. The crew chiefs stood beside each jet, maintenance log in hand, ready to brief the pilot on the aircraft's status. The pilots climbed the ladder, settled into the cockpit, and began their own pre-flight sequence. The canopies came down, the engines lit, the red-flagged arming pins had been pulled, and one by one, the fighters began to taxi toward the runway. Everything that was supposed to happen before this moment had happened. Every phone call at 2 a.m., every bus ride in the dark, every chain tightened on every vehicle in every cargo bay, every duffel bag packed, every wiring harness connected, every fuel tank filled. Thousands of individual actions performed by thousands of individual people across dozens of locations and multiple continents, all feeding into this single point. The first jet reached the end of the runway, lined up on centerline and held. Tower clearance came through the headset. The pilot pushed the throttles forward into afterburner. The exhaust cone turned white-blue. The jet released its brakes and began to accelerate, pressing the pilot back into the ejection seat. Within seconds, the nose rotated and the fighter climbed away from the runway, gear coming up, wings loaded with ordnance, heading toward the horizon. Behind it, the next one was already rolling.